Marcus Ashford couldn't believe what he was seeing. Sitting on a weathered park bench in the middle of Washington Square, crying silently with two sleeping infants cradled in her arms, was the last person he'd ever expected to see again. Isabel Torres, the graphic designer he'd personally fired from his legitimate art gallery 4 years ago. The woman whose brown eyes had haunted him through countless sleepless nights. The one person who'd made him question everything about the empire he'd inherited. He'd never searched for her after that day, convincing himself it was for the best, but she'd vanished so completely it was as if she'd been erased from the canvas of his life. But it wasn't the shock of seeing her that made the blood freeze in Marcus's veins. It was the two identical babies wrapped in worn blankets. Their tiny faces peaceful in sleep despite the autumn chill. They couldn't have been more than 6 months old, and even from this distance, Marcus could see something achingly familiar in their features. The strong jawline, the particular shape of their ears, the way one infant's hand was curled into a fist exactly the way Marcus's own hands closed when he slept. Marcus stood frozen on the gravel path. This man who'd made the entire New York underworld bend to his will, feeling his legs threaten to give way. His heart pounded so hard he thought it might shatter his ribs, and his fists clenched until his knuckles went white. Then Isabel lifted her tear-stained face, and their eyes met across the stream of joggers and dog-walkers. In those devastated brown eyes, Marcus saw everything. The confirmation he both dreaded and desperately needed, the raw panic of a woman who'd just been discovered, and something else. A massive secret balanced on the edge of revelation, ready to destroy the careful walls he'd built around his heart. Because those children were his. They had to be. The timeline matched perfectly with that one reckless night 4 years ago when he'd crossed every line he'd sworn never to cross. And Isabel, that talented artist with the unyielding spirit, had spent those years in hiding, raising 2 fragile lives alone, for reasons Marcus was about to uncover that were far more tangled and heartbreaking than any forgery in his shadowy world. If you want to know what drove Isabel into hiding and why Marcus's buried past is about to explode, tap like to support this story. I share with anyone who loves tales of redemption, second chances, and shocking revelations. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss what happens when Marcus learns the truth that will change 3 lives forever. To understand how it all began, we have to go back to the man Marcus Ashford truly was, a name whispered with equal parts respect and terror throughout New York's shadows. Marcus Ashford took the first step toward the bench, gravel crunching under his polished Oxfords like brittle bones. Each stride felt heavier than the last, as though the park itself were trying to hold him back. The autumn wind carried the scent of damp leaves and distant hot dog carts. Ordinary sounds of ordinary lives swirling around a man who had spent most of his 38 years orchestrating anything but ordinary. To the world, Marcus Ashford was exactly what the society pages claimed, a cultured 38-year-old art dealer whose Soho gallery drew collectors from London, Dubai, and Los Angeles. Photographs of him in black tie at Met Galas, arm-linked with senators or actresses, appeared regularly in Vanity Fair and the New York Times style section. He spoke softly at auction previews, quoted Ruskin and Baudrillard with equal ease, and smiled the practiced half-smile of someone who knew precisely how much charm to deploy. Beneath that polished surface lay the truth few people survived long enough to fully grasp. He was the sole heir to the Ashford Syndicate, the white-collar crime machine his father, Richard Ashford, had spent 4 decades perfecting. When Richard died of a sudden stroke 3 years earlier, in the empire, art forgery networks that could duplicate a Basquiat so flawlessly even the original artist might hesitate, money laundering pipelines that snaked through shell companies on 3 continents, offshore trusts disguised as private foundations, had passed to Marcus without ceremony. No coronation, no public announcement, Just a quiet meeting in the back office of the Ashford Gallery, where the board of directors, gray-haired men who had served his father since the 1980s, handed him the keys to a kingdom built on discretion rather than bloodshed. Marcus had rules his father had drilled into him from childhood. No drugs, no human trafficking, no gratuitous violence. "Brutality is loud," Richard used to say, tapping the side of his temple. "True power is silent. It moves through information, influence, and money so clean on paper that even the IRS can't find the stain." Marcus had taken the lesson to heart. The Ashford operation dealt in elegance, forged provenance documents that turned stolen masterpieces into legitimate assets, layered transactions that washed millions through legitimate art sales, authentication expertise so respected that federal agents occasionally consulted the gallery, unaware they were asking the fox to guard the henhouse. The Ashford Gallery itself was the perfect front. A sleek white space on Prince Street, floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist concrete floors, spotlights that made even mediocre canvases look transcendent. During business hours, it was legitimate profit. After hours in the climate-controlled basement vault or the soundproofed conference room behind the private viewing suite, it became something else entirely. Marcus kept his inner circle small. Graham Locke, head of security, had been with the family since Marcus was 20. Tall, quiet, ex-special forces with eyes that missed nothing, Graham handled protection, surveillance, and the occasional discreet problem. Marcus trusted him implicitly, or believed he did. The board of directors, 5 men who still referred to him as the boy when they thought he couldn't hear, provided institutional memory and institutional pressure. And then there was Elena Vasquez, the corporate attorney he had been seen with at charity dinners for the past 18 months. Elegant, ambitious, perfectly pedigreed. She understood the unspoken rules of his double life without ever needing to be told the details. She was, in every way his advisors approved of, appropriate. Yet none of them filled the silence that settled over him when the gallery lights went out and the city kept moving beyond the windows. Marcus had spent years convincing himself the loneliness was the price of control. He wore the mask so well that even he sometimes forgot there was a face underneath. Until 4 years ago, when Isabel Torres walked into his hiring interview with a portfolio that actually made him pause. She had been 26 then, fresh from Pratt, her sketches alive with a kind of restless honesty he rarely saw in the polished world of contemporary art. He had watched her for 6 months, how she stayed late to perfect exhibition catalogs, how she sketched in a battered moleskin during lunch breaks, how she once brought coffee to the night guard without being asked. She was light in a room that had grown steadily darker. And then came the night he had spent 4 years trying to erase. The memory rose unbidden as he crossed the final stretch of gravel. He could still feel the leather couch in his private office, the way her breath had caught when he kissed her, the way the city lights had painted gold across her skin. For a few hours he had let the mask slip completely. He had told her things he had never told anyone, about the suffocating weight of his father's expectations, about the exhaustion of always calculating risk, about the hollow ache of never being seen as anything but the next Ashford in line. She had listened, truly listened. And when dawn came, he had looked at her sleeping face and understood with terrible clarity that he had just painted a target on her back, that his enemies would see softness as leverage. Rivals in the forgery trade, federal agents building cases brick by quiet brick, even members of his own organization who resented his restraint. They would all recognize weakness if he allowed it. So he had done the only thing he knew how to do. He had become cold, clinical, untouchable. He had fired her the next morning with the same detached precision he used to close multi-million-dollar deals. 3 months severance. A reference letter, a door closed forever. He had told himself it was mercy. Now, 4 years later, those same children slept against her chest, and every careful wall he had built felt like paper in a rainstorm. Marcus reached the bench. Isabel lifted her head. Her brown eyes, still the same deep, searching brown, met his without warmth. An only wariness edged with exhaustion. Dark circles shadowed her skin. Her coat was too thin for the wind. The baby stirred slightly but did not wake. She spoke before he could. "Don't," she said, voice hoarse from crying or cold or both. "Don't pretend you care now." The words landed like a blade between ribs. Marcus felt something inside him fracture, not dramatically, not loudly, but irrevocably. He had negotiated multi-million-dollar deals in languages he barely spoke, stared down men who carried guns and grudges, dismantled operations that threatened everything his father had built. He had never once felt unprepared, until this moment. Because this time, he wasn't negotiating for power, or money, or survival. This time he was negotiating for something that actually mattered. And he had no idea if he still remembered how. Or Isabel Torres had walked into the Ashford Gallery 4 years earlier like someone carrying sunlight into a room that had forgotten how to be warm. 26, fresh out of Pratt Institute, she wore a simple black blazer over a white blouse and carried a portfolio that smelled faintly of fresh ink and coffee. Marcus had interviewed dozens of candidates that week, but hers was the only one that made him pause mid-sentence. Her designs were clean, intelligent, alive with subtle risk. He hired her on the spot. For 6 months, he watched her from a careful distance. She stayed late without being asked, tweaking exhibition catalogs until the colors sang on the page. She brought coffee to the night security guards, remembering their names and how they took it. During lunch breaks, she sat on the loading dock steps with a battered moleskin notebook, sketching quick studies of passers-by or the way light fractured through the gallery's skylights. She never flaunted her talent, never angled for praise. She simply did the work, quietly, thoroughly, as though excellence were its own reward. In a world that had grown steadily darker around him, board meetings that ended in veiled threats, late-night calls from men who measured loyalty in fear, Isabel was light. Not the blinding kind, but the steady, warm glow of someone who still believed beauty mattered. The night everything shifted was an exclusive preview for a controversial young painter whose work divided critics and collectors alike. The gallery had been transformed. Black walls, dramatic spotlights, champagne flutes catching the light like liquid diamonds. Marcus moved through the crowd in a charcoal suit, shaking hands, murmuring compliments, playing the part of the cultured gallerist everyone expected. Beneath the surface, he felt the familiar pressure building, his father's voice in his head, 3 years gone but never silent, demanding expansion, ruthlessness, more. He rarely drank. Tonight he made an exception. By the time the last guests left, the bottle of single malt on the bar in his private office was half empty. Isabel stayed behind to fix a printing error on the event programs. A small misalignment in the text blocks had escaped final proofing. She refused to let imperfect collateral go out under the Ashford name. Everyone else had gone home, and the gallery was quiet except for the low hum of the climate control system and the occasional creak of old floorboards settling. Marcus found her in the design studio, sleeves rolled up, hair slipping from its knot, frowning at her screen. He should have left her to it. Instead, he leaned in the doorway and asked if she needed help. She looked up surprised, then smiled. The small, unguarded smile she gave when she thought no one important was watching. They started talking, really talking. She told him about growing up in the Bronx, her mother working 3 jobs so Isabel could go to art school, the way she'd sketched on the subway to block out the noise of the world. She spoke of her dream, a small design studio of her own someday, somewhere quiet, where she could make things that mattered to people who didn't have millions to spend on art. He found himself answering. He told her about the suffocating weight of a legacy he had never chosen, about a father who measured love in obedience and success in silence, about the loneliness of wearing a mask every day so no one could see the man underneath, because the man underneath was afraid of failure, of betrayal, of softness. The whiskey loosened the words. The quiet loosened everything else. When he kissed her, it felt inevitable. Gentle at first, testing, then deeper, desperate, as though both of them had been starving for something neither knew how to name. Her hands slid under his jacket. His found the small of her back. They moved to the leather couch in his office without breaking contact, and surrounded by priceless paintings that watched in judgmental silence. Afterward, she fell asleep against his chest, her breathing slow and even. Marcus lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the afterglow fading into cold clarity. He had crossed a line he had sworn never to cross. His world did not allow for love, not real love, not the kind that left you vulnerable. Enemies circled constantly, rival forgers who wanted his authentication network, federal agents patiently building cases, even members of his own organization who whispered that he was too soft, too restrained. Isabel would be seen as leverage, a pressure point, a way to make Marcus Ashford bend. He had just painted a target on her back. When the first gray light of dawn slipped through the blinds and touched her sleeping face, Marcus had already made his choice. He would hurt her to save her. He would become the cold, detached boss she had never seen before. He would deliver the words like a business decision, alcohol, loneliness, a mistake, and watch her face change from trust to confusion to humiliation. He would break both their hearts so hers could keep beating somewhere safe, far from his shadows. He slid out from under her carefully, dressed in silence, and sat at his desk until she stirred. When morning light finally touched Isabel's sleeping face, Marcus was already gone from the couch, already armored again in the mask he wore so well. He would push her away. He would save her life. He just didn't know that in trying to protect her, he would miss the first year of his children's lives. Morning light sliced through the blinds in thin, unforgiving stripes. Isabel stirred on the leather couch, blinking against the unfamiliar ceiling of Marcus's private office. For a heartbeat, she looked soft, unguarded, the way she had looked when she fell asleep in his arms. Then she saw him seated at the desk, already dressed in a crisp charcoal suit, tie knotted with surgical precision, expression blank as fresh canvas. She sat up slowly, pulling the throw blanket around her shoulders. Marcus? He didn't smile. He didn't move closer. He spoke in the same measured tone he used when negotiating with collectors who thought they could lowball him. Last night was a mistake, he said. Alcohol and loneliness, nothing more. The words landed like ice water. Isabel's face changed in slow motion. Confusion first, brows drawing together as though she hadn't heard correctly. Then understanding arrived. A sharp and sudden, turning her eyes glassy. Hurt followed, raw and unguarded, the kind of hurt that makes breathing difficult. Finally, humiliation settled in, coloring her cheeks, tightening her jaw. Marcus kept going, each sentence delivered with the detached efficiency of a termination memo. I've decided to restructure the design department. Your position is being eliminated, effective immediately. You'll receive 3-month severance and a reference letter. He slid an envelope across the desk, thick vellum, embossed with the Ashford Gallery logo. Everything is in order. Isabel stared at the envelope as though it might bite. You're firing me. Yes. She searched his face for the man who had held her hours earlier, who had whispered confessions against her skin. She found only the gallerist everyone else saw, cool, composed, untouchable. She stood without touching the envelope, moved to the door on unsteady legs, paused once, hand on the knob as though waiting for him to call her back to say it was all a terrible joke. He didn't. The door closed with a soft click. Marcus remained motionless until he heard the distant chime of the front door and the murmur of the security guard offering to call her a car. Only then did he rise, cross the room, and lock the office door behind him. He leaned his forehead against the cool wood and let himself feel it. The ache started in his chest and spread outward, a slow fracture that made his ribs feel too small to contain his heart. Even a man who had grown up in the Mafia could have his heart broken. He had never imagined the pain would be so quiet, so complete. But he buried himself in work the way other men drown in whiskey. Meetings ran late into the night. Acquisitions doubled. He expanded the legitimate side of the business until the gallery's public profile was impeccable. He began dating Elena Vasquez, the attorney his advisors had long approved, elegant, discreet, perfectly aligned with the image he needed to project. She never asked for more than he offered. She never looked at him the way Isabel once had. But Isabel's face haunted him. The trust in her eyes before he shattered it. The way she had listened when he spoke of loneliness. The way her laughter had sounded like something he hadn't known he was missing until it was gone. 6 weeks after she left, Isabel stood in the cramped bathroom of her Bronx apartment staring at 2 pink lines on a cheap plastic stick. Shock hit first. Then fear so visceral her knees buckled. She slid to the tile floor, one hand pressed to her still flat stomach, pride warring with terror. Pride because she would not beg the man who had thrown her away. Terror because she had no safety net, no family money, no one to call. 3 weeks later, she was gone. No forwarding address, no last known contact. She simply vanished from every database Marcus's people could access. He told himself it was for the best. He told himself he had done the right thing. What Marcus didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that the same week he fired her, he had discovered his father's private ledger hidden in the basement vault. A thin black book of names and dates. A paranoid insurance policy compiled by Richard's second-in-command, Trevor Walsh. Isabel's name had been added in fresh ink, encircled twice, flagged as a potential vulnerability after someone had seen them talking too long in the design studio. Firing her had been the only way Marcus could think to make her disappear from his world before someone else made her disappear permanently. Graham Locke knew. He had seen the ledger the night Marcus found it. He had quietly removed Isabel's name from the active list and buried the page in an encrypted archive only he could access. He had never told Marcus. Some truths, Graham believed, were kinder when they stayed buried. For 4 years, Marcus carried the guilt like a second skin. He believed he had saved Isabel by pushing her away. He believed the ache in his chest was the price of mercy. Now, as he stood before that weathered park bench in Washington Square, as those 2 babies slept peacefully in her arms, their tiny features echoing his own, Marcus was about to learn that his kindness had carried consequences he never imagined, and that sometimes saving someone's life means missing everything that makes life worth living. Marcus stood before the bench, close enough now to see the faint tremor in Isabel's hands where they cradled the infants. The park noise, joggers' footfalls, distant laughter, a dog barking, faded to white static. Only the 2 of them existed in this small, charged circle. "Are they mine?" His voice came out rougher than he intended. Isabel's gaze flicked to the sleeping babies, then back to him. For a long moment she said nothing, the silence defiant, deliberate. Then she exhaled, the sound weary and final. "Sophia and Samuel," she said quietly. 6 months old, born 3 months premature. The names landed like stones in still water. Marcus felt the ripple move through his chest. He looked at the tiny bundled forms. Sophia's dark lashes fanned against pale cheeks. Samuel's small fist tucked under his chin. 6 months. The math aligned perfectly with that single night 4 years ago. Isabel's voice hardened. The NICU bills bankrupted me. I've been living in my car for 3 days because there was nowhere else to go. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it. Every rehearsed line he had prepared in the 30 seconds it took to cross the gravel path evaporated. "You don't get to care now," she said, each word clipped. "You made your choice 4 years ago. You used me, then threw me away like yesterday's catalog proof. You never cared. Not really." The accusation struck cleanly. I'd no room for deflection. He wanted to tell her the truth, that he had pushed her away to keep her alive, that he had spent 4 years replaying that morning in his head, that the mask he wore had cracked every time he remembered her face. But to explain would mean revealing the ledger, the hit list, the empire that still shadowed every breath he took. He couldn't risk it. Not here, not yet. Samuel stirred first, a small, fretful cry escaping. Sophia followed a heartbeat later, her wail thin but insistent. Isabel shifted instinctively, trying to soothe them both at once, but her arms were full and her strength visibly fraying. Marcus moved without thinking. He reached forward. Isabel recoiled, curling protectively around the babies. "Don't. Please," he said, softer than he had spoken in years. "Just let me help." She hesitated, as exhaustion winning over instinct. Slowly, she eased Samuel into Marcus's arms. The infant's cries stopped almost immediately. Those tiny eyes, dark hazel, unmistakably his own, opened and fixed on Marcus with solemn curiosity. Marcus felt something inside him give way, a quiet, irreversible shift. He cradled his son against his chest the way he had seen fathers do in passing glimpses of normal life, one hand supporting the small head, the other curved around the blanket. Samuel blinked once, then settled, tiny fingers curling into the lapel of Marcus's coat. Isabel watched, her expression unreadable. Marcus looked up at her. "Come with me. My penthouse, security, doctors, money, whatever you need. Let me take care of you, all 3 of you." Isabel's laugh was short, bitter. "I don't want your guilt money, Marcus. And I didn't come here for a handout." "Then why did you come?" She met his eyes squarely. "I came here to meet someone who can actually help me." Footsteps approached on the gravel path. A man in a dark suit, mid-40s, average height, average build, deliberately unremarkable, stopped a respectful distance away. He carried himself with the calm authority of someone who had spent years training people to underestimate him. "Ms. Torres," he said, "everything all right?" Isabel nodded once. Marcus felt the air change. "Who the hell are you?" "Special Agent David Chen, FBI." The man's tone was even, professional. He produced a credential folder, flipped it open briefly, then closed it. "We've been in contact with Ms. Torres for several months." Marcus's pulse kicked hard. He looked at Isabel. "Hey, you've been documenting," she finished for him. "Every late-night meeting in the basement vault. Every private viewing that ended with envelopes changing hands. Every time a painting left your gallery with new provenance papers that didn't match the old ones." Her voice stayed level, but the anger beneath it was molten. "I'm trading it all for witness protection, for me and the children." Shock moved through him like cold water. She knew. She had known for some time. The naive graphic designer he had fired to protect had spent 4 years piecing together exactly who he was. "I'm not the girl you threw away anymore," Isabel said. "I've spent 4 years learning who you really are, Marcus, and I'm getting my children as far from your world as I can." Agent Chen stepped forward, him extending a plain white business card between 2 fingers. "If you care about them, Mr. Ashford, you'll let them go." Marcus took the card automatically, the paper feeling insubstantial in his hand. Isabel stood, adjusting Sophia in one arm and reaching for Samuel. Marcus hesitated only a second before handing his son back. The transfer was careful, almost reverent. When the baby was secure against her chest again, Isabel met his eyes one last time. Then she turned. Marcus watched her walk away, slow steps on the gravel, the twins cradled close, Agent Chen falling in beside her like a quiet escort. She didn't look back. For the second time in 4 years, Marcus stood paralyzed, watching the woman he had once pushed away disappear from his life. Except this time, there were 2 innocent lives in the balance. And he wasn't sure he could let go. The elevator ride to the penthouse felt longer than the drive back from Washington Square. Marcus stood motionless, hands clasped behind his back, staring at his own reflection in the polished brass doors. The man looking back had the same controlled features, the same tailored coat, but something essential had shifted. He could still feel the brief weight of Samuel in his arms, the way the boy's cries had quieted against his chest. He could still see Isabel's face when she walked away, resolute, exhausted, finished with him. He stepped into the apartment. The city glittered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, indifferent. Marcus crossed to the bar, poured 2 fingers of scotch he had no intention of drinking, and pressed the intercom. "Graham, penthouse now." Graham arrived within 7 minutes. And he entered without knocking, the way he had for 15 years. Quiet footsteps, posture straight but never rigid, eyes scanning the room before settling on Marcus. He wore the same dark suit he always wore, the same expression of professional calm. Marcus didn't sit. He turned from the window and asked the only question that mattered. "Did you know about the children?" Graham didn't flinch. He met Marcus's gaze levelly. "For 3 months, sir." The admission hung between them. Marcus felt the air leave his lungs in a slow, controlled exhale. 3 months, he repeated. "Yes, sir." Marcus set the untouched glass down with deliberate care. "You've been watching her." "I've been watching them," Graham corrected gently. "When she came back to the city 6 months ago, I picked up the trail. A single mother with twins, living in a basement apartment in Sunset Park, working double shifts at a copy center, premature babies, constant medical appointments, no safety net." He paused. "I kept eyes on them, discreetly, without orders." Marcus's voice stayed even, though the edges were sharpening. "Why didn't you tell me?" Graham's answer was quiet, almost gentle. "Because you'd made your choice 4 years ago. You sent her away. I assumed you had your reasons. I respected them." A small, rueful lift of one shoulder. "But I couldn't let them be harmed. Even monsters deserve to know their fathers." Marcus looked away, jaw tight. The word monster landed without malice, only fact. He had spent years cultivating exactly that reputation. Now it felt like ill-fitting armor. Graham continued, unprompted. "There's more you should know." He reached into his jacket and withdrew a slim black folder, plain, unmarked. He placed it on the glass coffee table between them. Marcus opened it without speaking. The first page was a scanned photocopy from his father's private ledger. A single column of names, dates, notations in Trevor Walsh's cramped handwriting. Isabel Torres's name appeared near the bottom, circled in red ink, dated the same week Marcus had fired her. A single line beside it. Potential leverage, observed proximity to air. Marcus's fingers tightened on the page. Graham's voice remained steady. "Trevor added her name after someone reported seeing you 2 talking too long in the design studio. He was paranoid, always looking for weaknesses. You found the ledger the day after you let her go. I made sure her name disappeared from every active copy. I buried the original entry. You saved her life by breaking her heart. I made sure it stayed saved." Marcus closed the folder. For a long moment, the only sound was the low hum of the city far below. Then Graham spoke again, softer. "They're being watched now." Marcus's head snapped up. "Victor Kozlov," Graham said. "He's had eyes on her for weeks. Photographs of Isabel and the twins outside the pediatric clinic, a file building. He knows they're yours. He knows they're your weakness now. The name landed like a cold blade between ribs. Victor Kozlov, rival in the forgery trade, ambitious, patient, ruthless in ways Marcus had always refused to be. If Victor had proof of children, he had the perfect lever to force Marcus to hand over the authentication network that kept the Ashford operation legitimate in the underworld's eyes. Marcus paced once, twice, then stopped. I can't let her enter witness protection without real protection. The FBI can't shield her from Victor. I can't let him use my children as leverage, and I can't let the Bureau dismantle everything while my family is still vulnerable. Graham watched him carefully. What are you thinking? I need to talk to Victor. Directly. Graham's expression tightened, the first crack in his composure all evening. Sir, if you go to Kozlov, you show him he's right, that they matter to you. Marcus met his eyes. They do matter. That's the problem. A pause, then quieter. And that's the solution. Graham studied him for a long beat, then he nodded once. Well, then I'm coming with you. Marcus exhaled, the decision settling like stone. He turned back to the window, already mapping the conversation in his head. The offers, the threats, the careful dance that might keep his family alive. His phone buzzed on the glass table. Unknown number. He opened the message. The first photo showed Isabel's battered sedan parked outside a nondescript motel on the edge of Queens. The second showed Sophia and Samuel through the rear window, asleep in their car seats, tiny faces lit by the glow of a street lamp. The text beneath read, "Pretty family. Would be a shame if something happened to them. Let's talk business. V." Marcus's hand trembled. Just once. Just enough for Graham to notice. He forwarded the message without a word. Graham's jaw tightened as he read it. And Marcus looked at the city lights again, brighter now, colder. The game had begun, and his children were already pawns on Victor's board. Victor Kozlov's office occupied the top floor of a glass tower in Midtown, all sleek black marble and panoramic views of Manhattan glittering like a prize he already owned. Marcus entered alone, coat unbuttoned, hands visible. Victor waited behind a wide desk, legs crossed, a glass of vodka untouched beside him. The smile he wore was thin, satisfied. "Love makes men weak, Ashford," Victor said by way of greeting. "I never thought I'd see the day it happened to you." Marcus remained standing. "You have photographs. You've made your point. What do you want?" Victor leaned forward. "Your authentication network. Every contact, every algorithm, every private key that turns my forgeries into legitimate assets. Hand it over and your little family stays safe. I don't want to hurt them. I just want what you have." Marcus let silence stretch, buying time the way he had bought time in 100 negotiations before. "You understand what you're asking? That network is the only thing keeping my operation clean in the eyes of the world." 48 hours, Victor said. "After that, I start with the girl in the pink blanket. Clock's running." Marcus gave a single nod, expression unreadable, and left without another word. The FBI safe house was a nondescript brownstone in Brooklyn Heights. Rosa Torres arrived just after dusk, gray coat buttoned to the throat, hands clasped tight around a worn leather purse. Agent Chen met her at the door, searched the bag, then stepped aside. And Isabel sat on the living room sofa, Sophia asleep against her shoulder, Samuel in a portable crib nearby. When Rosa entered, Isabel's breath caught. "Mama!" Rosa crossed the room in 3 steps and pulled her daughter into a fierce embrace, careful not to wake the baby. Then she drew back, eyes wet. "I should have told you sooner." Isabel frowned. "Told me what?" Rosa sat beside her. 20 years ago, I worked as a bookkeeper for Richard Ashford. I saw things, ledgers, transfers, names that disappeared. When your father started asking questions about missing funds, Richard destroyed him. Blackmail. Threats. Your father didn't abandon us, Isabel. He was driven away. I recognized Marcus's name the night you came home pregnant. I forbade you from contacting him because I knew exactly what world he belonged to. I was protecting you from the same man who destroyed my life." Isabel stared at her mother, the words rearranging every memory she had of her childhood, her father's sudden disappearance, the years of scraping by, the silence Rosa had always maintained. Everything cracked open at once. Across the city, in the dim light of his office, Marcus opened the encrypted email from the private lab. The DNA report was clinical, precise. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. Then, the second page. Isabel carried a rare genetic mutation, Huntington-like, autosomal dominant, triggered and accelerated by the stress of a high-risk twin pregnancy. Early symptoms already present: tremor, fatigue, subtle cognitive slips. Life expectancy from diagnosis, 18 to 24 months. Progressive neurological deterioration, incurable. Marcus read the words twice. Then he tore the pages into confetti and let them fall across the desk. Graham found him there 20 minutes later, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. "She's dying, Graham." The words came out raw, stripped of every layer of control. "And she doesn't even know I know." Graham stood in the doorway, silent for a long moment. "Maybe that's why she came back to New York. Not just for witness protection, for you. To give you the children before she can't anymore." Marcus lifted his head. The impossible situation pressed in from every side. Protect them from Victor, lose them to the FBI. Watch Isabel fade while the clock ran out. He stood slowly. "I'm going to give Victor what he wants," he said. "But I'll deliver it in a way that destroys him. I'll work with the FBI on my terms. A full immunity for testimony, protection for Isabel and the children, medical care at the best facility in the country, and I'm going to win back her trust before time runs out." Graham watched him. "You're going to burn it all down." "I'm going to burn down everything my father built," Marcus said, "and I'm going to do it in 48 hours. He crossed to his desk, opened his phone, and composed 3 messages. The first to Victor: "We have a deal. Meet me tomorrow. Pier 47, midnight." The second to Agent Chen: "I'm ready to talk, but I need guarantees. Full protection for my family. Best care for Isabel. New identities when it's done." Asterisk. The third to Isabel. The first words he had sent her in 4 years. "I know about the diagnosis. I know what Rosa told you, and I know you came back to give me our children. But I'm not taking them. I'm taking all 3 of you, whether you want me to or not." He hit send. In the safe house, Isabel's phone lit up on the coffee table. She stared at the screen, hands beginning to tremble, not from cold, not from fear, but from the slow, inexorable progression of the disease she had only just begun to name. How does he know? How does he always know? She looked at her sleeping children, then at her mother, who had gone still beside her. The message glowed in the dim room, quiet and certain. And somewhere in the dark, the clock kept ticking. 2 days after Marcus's message, Isabel agreed to meet him at Mount Sinai for the twins' routine checkup. She was also scheduled for her own tests, more scans, more blood work, more confirmation of the slow unraveling inside her. She arrived first. He pushing the double stroller through the pediatric wing's bright corridors, Samuel chewing on a teething ring, Sophia babbling softly. Marcus arrived minutes later with Graham at his shoulder, both men in dark coats that did nothing to hide the tension in their postures. Agent Chen and 2 plainclothes agents maintained surveillance from opposite ends of the hallway. Everyone was on edge, the air thick with unspoken stakes. The attack came without warning. Alarms shattered the quiet first, then screams, then gunfire. Victor's men, 4 of them, masked, armed, burst through the service doors at the far end of the pediatric wing. Chaos erupted instantly, parents scooping up children, nurses diving behind counters, overhead lights flickering as bullets punched into drywall. Marcus sprinted toward the examination rooms where Isabel had taken the twins. Graham moved parallel, drawing his sidearm, already firing controlled shots to slow the advance. Isabel heard the first shots and froze for half a second before instinct took over. She scooped both babies from the exam table, heart slamming, and ran for the corridor. She made it 3 steps before a masked man blocked the doorway. He grabbed Sophia from her arms with brutal efficiency. "Your daddy needs motivation," he snarled, voice muffled but unmistakable. Isabel's scream tore through the corridor, raw, animal, echoing off the sterile walls. She lunged after him, clutching Samuel to her chest, but another gunman stepped in, forcing her back into the room. Marcus reached the doorway seconds too late. He saw Sophia's small form disappear around the corner, carried by a man already moving toward the stairwell. Samuel wailed in Isabel's arms. Isabel's knees buckled, but she stayed upright through sheer will. Graham appeared in the hallway, intercepting the second gunman. He took 2 rounds to the chest, center mass, before he could return fire. He staggered, managed 1 clean shot that dropped the man clutching his side, then collapsed at Marcus's feet. "Get your daughter back," Graham rasped, blood bubbling at his lips. FBI agents poured in from both ends of the corridor, weapons raised, returning fire. The remaining kidnappers retreated through the stairwell, Sophia still in their grasp. The hallway filled with smoke and shouting. Isabel sank to the floor. Samuel pressed against her. Her body began to shake, not fear, but the first violent tremor of the seizure her condition had been warning about for months. She convulsed once, twice. Marcus dropped beside her, catching her before her head struck the tile. "Stay with me, Isabel. Please stay with me." Doctors and nurses rushed in. They took Samuel from her arms, wheeled her onto a gurney. Marcus stood frozen in the corridor, hands slick with Graham's blood, watching them disappear through swinging doors. Graham was already in emergency surgery. Isabel was sedated in a private room, Samuel in pediatric ICU under observation. The hospital went into lockdown. FBI agents sealed every exit. Agent Chen found Marcus in the hallway outside the OR, still staring at the blood on his hands. "Tell us everything," Chen said. "Now." Marcus's voice cracked. "I'll tell you anything. Just help me get my daughter back." His phone rang. Victor. "You have 6 hours to transfer the authentication network," Victor said, voice calm, almost amused. "Or Sophia disappears forever." Marcus's grip tightened on the phone. "You'll get what you want, but I deliver it personally." Victor laughed. "Come to the warehouse district, Pier 47, midnight. Come alone, or the baby dies." Marcus ended the call. Chen stepped closer. "You can't go. It's a trap. Let us handle this. Surveillance, SWAT, the works." "Your way takes time," Marcus said. "Time I don't have." He agreed to the FBI plan publicly, full briefing, tactical staging, coordinated entry. But privately, he moved alone. In a quiet corner of the hospital admin wing, he transferred the real authentication network to a single encrypted drive. And then he wrote a custom virus, simple, elegant, devastating, designed to activate the moment the drive was plugged into Victor's system. It would flag every forgery authenticated through the Ashford network, expose buyer lists, crash transaction records, and light up federal databases like a Christmas tree. "I'll get Sophia back," he told the empty room. "Then I'll burn everything down." Isabel woke as he prepared to leave. She was pale, monitors beeping softly beside her bed. Samuel slept in the bassinet nearby. She had already been told about Graham, about the plan. "You're going to get yourself killed," she whispered. "Then I die getting our daughter back." His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed him. "I've already wasted 4 years. I won't waste another second." Isabel reached for his hand. "I never wanted witness protection. I wanted you to fight for us. 4 years ago, I wanted you to fight for me." "I fought the only way I knew how," he said, "by pushing you away." "That's not fighting. That's running." He told her everything then. The hit list in his father's ledger, Trevor Walsh's paranoia, the reason he had fired her so cruelly. "I thought I was saving you. I was just losing you." Isabel listened, tears slipping down her cheeks. She told him about the pregnancy test in her tiny bathroom, the NICU nights when the twins fought for every breath, the years of raising them alone while pride kept her from begging. Every first word, every first step, you weren't there because you chose power over us. "I chose your life," he said quietly. "I'd make the same choice again. But I'll spend the rest of my life regretting it." Her mother's confession had already shifted something in her. She understood now the world he had been born into, the choices it forced. "Go get our daughter," she said. "But Marcus, come back. Come back to all of us." He leaned down. Their first kiss in 4 years was gentle, desperate, tasting of tears and lost time and fragile hope. Marcus left the hospital at 11 p.m., alone, the flash drive heavy in his pocket. Behind him, Isabel held Samuel against her chest, watching him disappear down the corridor. Agent Chen watched from a surveillance van across the street, waiting to see if Marcus would betray the Bureau's trust. Graham lay in surgery, fighting for his life. Somewhere in the dark warehouse district, Victor Kozlov held a 6-month-old baby girl and smiled, certain that Marcus Ashford's weakness would finally be his downfall. The clock ticked toward midnight, and Marcus drove toward the pier, knowing the next hour would determine if he lost everything or gained the only thing that had ever truly mattered. Midnight at Pier 47 was cold and quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your skin. Marcus walked alone down the cracked concrete toward the open warehouse doors. Victor waited inside under a single hanging bulb, flanked by 4 armed men. Sophia cried softly in a portable crib at his feet, tiny fists waving in distress. Marcus stopped 10 feet away. "Network for the baby." Victor's smile was thin, triumphant. "Smart man." He nodded to one of his guards, who stepped forward to take the encrypted drive Marcus extended. Victor plugged it into a laptop on a makeshift table. The screen lit up, authentication keys, contact lists, proprietary algorithms scrolling past. Victor's eyes gleamed. Marcus reached for Sophia. The guard hesitated, then stepped aside at Victor's nod. Marcus lifted his daughter for the second time in his life. She quieted against his chest almost instantly, small face pressed to his coat, tears drying on her cheeks. Victor leaned back. "See? Love made you weak, Ashford. You just gave me everything." Marcus looked down at Sophia, then back at Victor. "No," he said quietly. "I gave you nothing." Victor's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then froze. Error messages cascaded across the screen. Forgery records flagged. Buyer lists exposed. Transaction chains unraveling in real time, lighting up federal databases like flares. Marcus's voice was calm. "I gave you my father's empire. Well, I burned it down, with you inside it." Victor's face twisted. He reached for his gun, but the warehouse doors exploded inward. FBI tactical teams poured through, weapons raised, shouting commands. Agent Chen led the advance, moving with practiced precision. Marcus had been wired the entire time. Victor's confession, clear, arrogant, damning, had already been recorded. The standoff lasted less than 30 seconds. Victor's men dropped their weapons one by one. Victor himself was cuffed, still staring at the ruined laptop as though it had personally betrayed him. As agents dragged him toward the doors, Victor twisted to look back at Marcus. You think this saves you? Your organization will kill you for this betrayal. Marcus cradled Sophia closer. There is no organization anymore. I'm about to make sure of that. Days later, the hospital smelled of antiseptic and quiet hope. Graham lay in recovery, stable, tubes and monitors tracking his steady heartbeat. Isabel's room was dim, the twins in side-by-side cribs. Her condition had stabilized after the seizure, but the prognosis remained unchanged. Time measured in months, not years. Marcus sat beside her bed, Sophia asleep on his shoulder, Samuel in Isabel's arms. Agent Chen entered with a slim folder. "Full immunity for your testimony," Chen said. "Witness protection for the family. Best medical care for Isabel. Government expense. New identities when the testimony concludes. Graham included. Loyalty has its rewards." Marcus nodded. "Complete dismantlement of the Ashford Syndicate. Every file, every name my father worked with. I'll burn it down. I give you everyone." He paused. "But my family disappears completely. New names, new lives, no trace." Chen studied him. Agreed. Word of the deal reached the old board within hours. Trevor Walsh, Richard's paranoid second-in-command, the man who had added Isabel's name to the hit list, sent a single encrypted message. "Betray us, and your family dies. Doesn't matter where you hide." Marcus answered with one final piece of leverage from his father's private files. Proof of Trevor's embezzlement, ties to 3 unsolved murders. The exposure was immediate, brutal, and irreversible. Trevor vanished from the underworld the next day, whether arrested or silenced. No one asked. 6 months later, in a small chapel outside Eugene, Oregon, the man once called Marcus Ashford stood at the altar as Michael Torres. Isabel sat in a wheelchair at the front, illness progressing but eyes bright with quiet joy. Rosa held Sophia. Graham, now George Lane, held Samuel. The twins, 1 year old, babbled happily in their grandmother's and uncle's arms. The ceremony was small, only family. They wrote their own vows. Isabel's voice was soft but steady. "4 years ago, you broke my heart to save my life. Today I give you what's left of that life. However long or short, it's yours. You are no longer the man who pushed me away. You're the man who burned down an empire to keep me safe. You're the father who risked everything for our children. You're mine, finally, completely mine." Marcus swallowed once. "I was born into darkness and lived there for 38 years. Then I fired a beautiful graphic designer because I was afraid to love her. I spent 4 years regretting that fear. Today, I'm no longer afraid. I've lost the empire, the money, the power, and I've gained everything. You are my redemption, Isabel. You and Sophia and Samuel. I will love you for every day we have left. And when you're gone, I will love you in how I raise our children." The doctor had given Isabel less than a year. Already the tremors were more pronounced, the fatigue deeper. But she smiled, truly smiled, and whispered, "I'd rather have 1 real year with you than a lifetime of safety without you." 9 months after the wedding, Isabel lay in a hospital bed at home, very weak now. The twins, 3 years old, played in the next room under Rosa's watchful eye. Marcus sat beside her, holding her hand. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Everything you gave up?" "I regret 4 years," he said. I regret every day I wasn't there. I regret that we don't have more time. But giving up the empire, never. You taught me what actually matters. Not power, not money. This, right here, you, them, us. Promise me you'll..." And watching 5-year-old Sophia and Samuel chase each other through the grass. Graham, George now, sat beside him, fully recovered, helping the twins build a lopsided fort while Michael worked on a canvas. Isabel's portrait, from memory. Soft light on her face the way he remembered it in the gallery that first day. The children asked about their mother every day. He told them true stories, how brave she was, how she survived alone, how she came back not for money, but for love, how she fought her illness for 2 years to give them every moment she could. He was no longer Marcus Ashford. That man had died on Pier 47, choosing his daughter over his empire. He was Michael Torres now, art teacher at the community college, single father, man who had traded power for love and never looked back. Sometimes on quiet nights, but he thought about the park bench in Washington Square where Isabel had sat crying with 2 babies, and he had to decide who he wanted to be. "Daddy, look!" Sophia called, holding up a flower she'd picked. Samuel ran up behind her. "Is this the kind Mommy liked?" Michael pulled them both into his arms, these miracles he had almost never known, these children who had saved him from himself. "Yes," he said, voice thick with memory and love. Exactly the kind she liked. And in the Oregon sunset, surrounded by the family he had chosen over an empire, the man who once had everything and nothing finally understood what it means to be rich.